We have Matt Dinniman, who's the author of Dungeon Crawler Carl. We have Falon Ballard, who's the author of Something Wicked. We have Wendy Martin, who's author of the Castle Swimmer graphic novel. We have SenLin Yu, who's the author of Alchemised. And Serena Valentino, who's the author of the Disney Villain series. And this is the Fantastical World Building panel. So I will start us off by saying that a reader's introduction to a new fantasy world is one of the most important moments, and I loved how each of you introduced the reader to your world in different ways. So Serena, in the Odd Sisters, you introduced the reader to your world and characters by telling stories of how the Odd Sisters impacted the world. And Matt, you introduced the world to the reader by having other characters explain the game show Dungeon Crawler World to Carl. Would you each walk us through your process for introducing the reader to your world? Falon, would you like to start us off?
Oh gosh, okay, no pressure. So I kind of just dove right in and liked to just kind of thrust my readers into the world. Something Wicked is set in a very Moulin Rouge-esque pleasure club, so I think there's just like a lot of details that you can get right off the bat. So I really tried to do that, and I had a lot of fun writing these little like interludes that give you some history into the country that we are in and sort of like the political turmoil that they are facing at that point in time. So those were like fun little nuggets that I like to throw in to help introduce the reader to the world.
Amazing. Matt?
I like to cheat. I do it kind of the standard way that a lot of authors do it is the main character, the point of view character, Carl, is learning the same time we are. He's just a regular guy from the regular world that gets thrust into an intergalactic alien game show. And it's not a spoiler. Donut dying in book 8, that's a spoiler. No. No, so I like to see through the eyes of the point of view character. It's a first-person point of view, and we learn the world as he learns it, and that's a very it's an easy way, but it's a very effective way to world build.
Amazing. Wendy?
I'm kind of the same way. I like to just like throw people into the story, and since I work on graphic novels and I do artwork, I can kind of do a lot of like the background story world building through the art. So through the dialogue, I try to have as little explanation as possible because of that.
Love it.
I unfortunately decided to make things as difficult for myself as possible by having a character who was knowledgeable. And so I didn't have good context to like explain things because she would presumably already know about them. And so, but because she was this very academic character, she was often analyzing things, and she's also a foreigner, and so she often analyzes situations on the basis of culturally, this is where she comes from, but they do things differently here. And so she knows the differences, but she always has to sort of like add that extra like element of navigating a situation because she knows that culturally they have different, like they have a slightly different value system. They operate in different ways than the way that she grew up doing things. And so that was sort of a context to explain why things were different when the character would be knowledgeable about those things.
Amazing. Serena?
I love describing like places and rooms and what people are wearing, and it's one of my most favorite part of storytelling. But I let the characters like lead me to those places, so I will like explain like through the character, but then I also have the Odd Sisters who will chime in and give background of the story. But I very purposefully started the series off very insular, and the world was tiny. And even though I wanted to explain the entire world and explain like everybody, I let each book expand the world with each time. So now we're at a place in the series where I'm working on 13. The world is huge, but and so it's kind of interesting. So it's like letting the readers experience like how huge the world is, and it gets larger and larger and larger with each book. So I'm not sure if that answered your question well.
It's great. I love it. So Margaret Owen once told me that when she begins crafting a new civilization and world, she starts with the sewage systems because the way a civilization stores its sewage reveals a lot about it. Would you share with us where you begin with your world building process, Falon?
Okay. That is like also an important point for me. I was like, there will be indoor plumbing. That is first and foremost. That has to happen. But again, like I said, with Something Wicked, it is sort of drawing inspiration from Moulin Rouge. So I was very lucky, and again, cheating a little bit because I had this like very visual world that I could already draw inspiration from, and also then a very loose time period that I also could sort of draw from. Again, I did Google like, was there indoor plumbing in 1899? And then I was like, well, there definitely is in my world, so it doesn't really matter if that's a real thing or not. But for me, I really like to sort of like have that visual in my brain first, and then the hard part is transcribing that visual from my brain onto the page.
I love it. Matt?
Whenever I build a new society, the first question I ask is how do they treat animals, and how do they treat those who are less fortunate than themselves? And you can really build around those blocks very, very easily, I feel, and that's always the first question I ask.
Amazing. Wendy?
I like going with themes, like my current series is underwater, because I think that gives the reader a lot of questions that makes them want to explore that world. But also I kind of usually decide on a world based on like what terrible things I want to happen to my characters. So it's like, obviously I'm going to put monsters to try and eat my characters in it.
You have to. Amazing.
So I knew that my world was going to be very heavily built around a system of alchemy. And so I started with the metals, and I knew with one character specifically that I wanted them to be associated with iron because iron is like the metal of war. It is associated with Mars and Ares and all of that different kind of concept. And so then I was working through like, okay, well then what metals are the other characters associated with? And I knew that like there was going to be somebody who was associated with gold, and gold is associated with the sun. And there's a lot of different like sun worship or like rulers and things who have associated themselves very closely with the sun. And so then studying a lot of different cultures that have either had some kind of like sun deities or had in fact like real monarchs or something that heavily associated themselves with the sun, and kind of utilizing those different cultural elements in order to kind of get ideas of what are consistent patterns, things like that as a starting point.
I love it. Serena?
My stories always start with the character. That's always the core for me, whether it's working with, Disney's IP or my own, it always centers there. And then the next step is architecture, because that is one of my favorite things. And I love doing research about different worlds, different time periods, but for Disney, I had to essentially recreate a world that sort of already exists in everybody's imaginations. So I had to create like a map where all these different kingdoms like are in the same space. So for me, it's easier to start with the person, start with the house, build the home, and then build. So I'm starting like from the core, going outside, and then each layer outside of it until it reaches the other character's domain, like where they are. And each realm is very different. So I've got like all these different worlds coexisting like in the same place. There's many kingdoms, so it's hard to say where I would start in terms of each kingdom. We would just be here like all day because there's like 13 books. But I will say that my core is with the person, who the book is about, and where they live, and then I work my way out from there.
I love that process. So I really enjoyed how each of you incorporated history and culture, leading to delightfully realistic, immersive, and entertaining worlds. Falon, you have a little bit of like Shakespeare's Macbeth and Moulin Rouge. And then Wendy, you spin your own take on mermaids. How did each of you approach incorporating history and culture to flavor your worlds and make them believable? Falon, would you like to start?
Yeah, so for me, the basis of this story is Macbeth. It was a very loose retelling, so I really looked to the text, and I've always been a huge Shakespeare nerd, and so for me, it was grounding this series in what I kind of consider to be the four main tragedies of Macbeth, Hamlet, Othello, and Romeo and Juliet. So you have characters from all of these different stories that are in one world and interacting with each other. And so that was the jumping off point for me, was taking those characters and kind of throwing them into this new world where we are sort of like post-revolution, you know, the monarchy has like been overthrown already, and where do we go from here to establish this new world order?
Amazing. Matt?
Yeah, any time you want to build a world, unless it just spontaneously appeared, the history of the world is one of the most important things that shapes it. I mean, looking outside in San Diego, you can see buildings from the 1800s all the way up to brand new modern buildings. And so knowing the history of your land that you're creating is crucial. There's wars, there's depressions, there's famine, there's times of boom, and knowing all of that is crucial, and it builds everything around it. And it's also important to the story itself, because if you have characters who live in this world and they've been in there for a long time, things that have happened in the past will always be weighing on them, just like all of us have things from our past weighing on ourselves. Like the boom of the real estate boom that happened post 2009 or whatever had a great effect on the real estate landscape of our world. So, and things that are happening now, who's president now, it affects everything. So having a great grasp of your own world's history is crucial. You don't want people to read your book and think that they suddenly appeared like NPCs in a video game right when you walk in the room, and that they've been frozen waiting for your character to interact off of.
I love it. Wendy?
Yeah, I guess in my case, there's been like a long history of like mermaid comics that have kind of like set, or just mermaid stories in general, that have like set the expectation. So I think what I wanted to do is to do the opposite of the trope. So it's like a Little Mermaid. They usually go to the surface and fall in love with a man. My characters do not, and they're gay. So that's like the opposite.
Yes.
And yeah, most are mermaid stories. A woman is the main character, and I wanted to do it with a man main character. So just like doing something different with this long trope of mermaids.
I love them.
So because I knew that I was working with alchemy, I wanted to do a much more like scientific type of alchemy rather than kind of more a mythical, like soft magic system. And so I did a lot of study into like real world alchemy, and it was really interesting because like history is real world history is actually super shaped by the study of alchemy for so long, because it was what was believed to be like the major science for a long time, and then they realized it didn't work and we switched to chemistry. But a lot of chemistry is built into a lot of the old alchemy ideas, and alchemy and the church were super deeply entwined. And so you had a lot of monks that believed like they had to discover the elixir of life in order to be able to defeat the Antichrist and stuff like that. And so there's all of this like integration of like religion and alchemy and everything. And so when I was doing research, just discovering like this kind of like really long history of how these really early assumptions, like from the ancient Greeks, basically shaped science in Europe all the way until like the 17th century. It was super interesting, and it's because like Alchemised is like a gothic fantasy, and gothic literature often really leans into the whole idea of like buried secrets. The past is always kind of haunting you, and so getting to like pull all those different elements into one story that kind of like explores how early science and early ideas and assumptions just keep shaping the world into the future, even when people think that they have like evolved past that, their foundation is still there, and until they're able to like actually confront those things, like they're going to stay stuck in those same situations.
I love it. I went down an alchemy rabbit hole once and just researching all the different things connected to it. It was very fascinating, but it took a really long time.
It is an endless black hole.
Yeah, absolutely. Serena?
Well, each book has its own like history and background and the amount of research that I had to do for each story. And so with each story, I try to introduce something interesting from history, intertwine it with the book. So like say, for example, the Cruella de Vil book, I did do a lot of research about the dynamics between people who live upstairs in the house and the people who live downstairs and who serve them. What are the different rules? Like, how do people like set the dining table? Like, what time of day do they have tea? How often do they spend with their children every day? Like, and it's so, that I find all that stuff really intriguing in terms of like history in general. It's like my special interest, my thing that I love researching. So that was a lot of fun. And then I just do like fun, silly things, like say with The Beast Within, I thought, well, maybe there's not a lot of people who know about the book by Oscar Wilde, Portrait of Dorian Gray. So I decided to incorporate elements from that story in there, hoping that maybe it would encourage somebody to read, that book. I also incorporated some of the aspects from Jean Cocteau's version of Beauty and the Beast, which is like, if you haven't seen it, it's probably one of the most beautiful films like you'll ever see. It's all in black and white. It's gorgeous. So I added a lot of those elements, hope, and then I talk about those things a lot, like in the interviews that I do, because a lot of the younger readers that read my books haven't seen Jean Cocteau's version and like haven't read Oscar Wilde, and so I try to like throw things in there like in the lore of one of the lands that I created for the series, Morningstar Kingdom. There's this gigantic lighthouse, and I created a character named Mr. Fresnel who created the lens, because I'm a nerd. I love lighthouses. I love researching things. And Fresnel lenses, which is what lights lighthouses. If you haven't seen them, you need to Google Fresnel lighthouse lenses. They're like so like 1920s, like Metropolis. If you haven't seen Metropolis, okay, it's like I'm an old movie nerd. Like I like to incorporate like all this stuff. So I like to throw little things like in there. Not only like based in history, because I just love history so much, but I create characters that are steeped in that history, hoping to inspire other people to read these books or read about these topics, because I think they're cool.
You've inspired me. Remind me to look up the lighthouse lenses after this. Okay, so each of you weaves some form of magic or power into your world and characters. So Falon, for your main character, Lady Catherine, her magic is a fundamental part of her daily life. Would each of you walk us through your process for designing a magic system and deciding to what extent it will impact your characters? Falon, would you like to start?
So when I first sat down to write the first version of this book, which has since gone through many, many revisions, it was right around the time that Roe v. Wade was being overturned, and I was feeling a lot of feminine rage and angst, and that really shaped the magic system in this book. So only the women have magic, and they have very long since been persecuted for that magic, had lots of rules and laws and restrictions in place against them. And the sort of main setting in Something Wicked is this pleasure club where these women who have gifts are able to come and be safe and live their life. And so with Kate, I wanted her magic to be an integral part of her life. and she is a courtesan, so she has sex magic, and that was fun. I had a lot of fun writing that, and she was sort of the impetus to really design the whole magic system. It was really, taking her character and the heart of her and then building out everything else in the magic system around her, and also her twin sister, who is also gifted as well. They were sort of the heart of that magic, and then everything else kind of came around that.
Amazing. Matt?
Yeah, so in Carl, there really isn't magic. It's all science. They are... Exactly. They are stuck on a game show. The people who created the world are using tools they don't understand to create the world. And so there are magic spells that the characters receive as prizes.
Magic.
But it's
That sounds like magic.
Let me finish. But so the stage magic, basically what they have is all the rule of cool, and there's no real science system behind it other than the fact that they can do it because of the science that creates the set. It's a TV show where the producers will stick their finger on the scale if it's cooler, or if it will break the game, then they'll take their finger off the scale. So everything is in some ways balanced, but not in the ways you would think. It's balanced in the ways that will make for good drama. And that was another way I cheated in writing the book, because it makes it a lot easier. Because it's fun, it'll be funny if we give the cat Fireball. So they give the cat Fireball, and Carl gets a spell, but he could break the entire game with his spell, even though he's been working really hard on it. Well, let's take that spell away from him so he doesn't. And it's very, very unrealistic if it were naturally occurring out in the real world and not a world that's being controlled by producers. So that's the way it works in Carl.
I love it. Wendy?
I tend to be pretty loose with the magic systems and the magic I give my characters, but my main rule is that I don't want the magic to easily solve their problems. In fact, I prefer it if it gives them more problems, and if it almost kills them because they can't control it. That's my favorite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, love it.
So when I first started working on Alchemised, it was supposed to be sort of this more magical magic system. But I knew it had to be decently hard because the character is academic, and so they had to be able to interrogate their magic system and be experimenting with it and everything. And I ended up building it all the way around in a circle and turned it into a sci-fi. But the characters don't know that they're in a science fiction. They think that they're in a fantasy where they have a magical power, which was really interesting. As a writer, we're basically operating with a kind of a very, very set rules that are mostly science-based, but to the characters, they are not aware of this context. For them, it's a much more magical, sacred, divine-related abilities that they have, and so they believe that the constraints are related to their belief system. But as the writer, I was operating from a place of it being actually more of a sci-fi type of abilities that they were utilizing, but they just didn't have the information about why they had those abilities.
I love that. Serena?
Magic's one of my favorite parts of the series because I had to create different types of magic for all the different kinds of characters. We have fairy magic, which is wish granting magic, but I have very specific rules that I've written for each type of magic. So we've got necromancers, we've got people who use blood magic, we've got more stereotypical witch magic, fairy magic, and it's fun to sort of navigate the different styles of magic and how they work against each other. I mean, with the Odd Sisters, again, I've sort of revealed I haven't ever just put out there all at once, this is what all these people can do and this is how they do it. With each book, we learn a little bit more, what they can do and what they can't do. So I don't have a blanket statement about the magic, because I have so many different magic users like in the series, but I really do enjoy like creating different types of magic and having the rules for each one of those magics, and I never break the rule, because like as a personal choice, like when you start breaking your own rules and the characters that you've created, then it starts to not become believable. And so I try my hardest to make the things that are most outrageous or most fanciful feel real, and then I do have a tendency to make the things that are kind of more mundane like more dramatic. Like it's kind of like I'm back and forth.
I love it. Okay, so Serena, Matt, Falon, and Wendy, you've each crafted a series or are in the process of doing so, and then SenLin Yu, Alchemised, is a standalone. Would each of you describe how the knowledge that you either needed to continue exploring your world in another book or needed to create a world that lent itself to a standalone impacted the way you developed it? Falon?
Yeah, this was one of the hardest things for me because all of my contemporary romances are standalone, so I've never really had to think about, what is going to happen in the next book before. And it was hard to kind of have that balance of, obviously you want the reader to be fulfilled with reading this book, but you do still want there to be some questions that you are going to answer, in the subsequent books. So that was something that I really relied a lot on my editor and beta readers to give me that feedback of, we need more information here, or you can pull back a little bit and leave a little bit of mystery here. That was probably one of the biggest challenges for me with starting a series is, finding when to give more and when to kind of pull back.
I love it. Matt?
I like writing both standalones and series, and with a series that has such a large, complex world, such as the Carl series, it's difficult because it's really easy to punt to the next book. You say, well, why does this happen, or why is this happening? And you can leave it be, but then what happens is that bucket of stuff that you need to explain starts to get deeper and deeper and deeper, and it's really, really hard to keep track of sometimes. So there's a difficult balance in writing a series, especially one where the cast of characters, the cast of locations, the cast of plot threads gets bigger and bigger and bigger with each book. And I am just so impressed with the ASL people. They talk so fast. Sorry. But it can be overwhelming, and that's where I keep very careful track. I'm a pantser, so I don't know where I'm going. I'm making it all up as I go along, but I keep very, very careful track of everything in the past. So I have an Excel sheet that keeps stats on every single character. It has everyone's inventory. It has all the weird things that Carl keeps in his inventory that we haven't used yet, and all the plot threads, and we will eventually get to it. But yeah, it's really, really hard. And when you write a standalone, there's other challenges that we'll hear about, but it's you don't have to get to them all. So, yeah.
I love it. Wendy?
I just kept wanting to put my boys in bad situations, and I just had more and more ideas of things I could do to them. And I was also just really enjoying the world I created. I thought I had new ideas of where they could travel to and what they could do. So,
Amazing.
So I actually, I did not think that I could find a publisher that would be willing to publish my book as a standalone. And so when I was first world building for it and kind of trying to plot out a structure, I was like, okay, I have to make this into a trilogy because that's the only thing that would work if I can't have this as a standalone. And so I did all this work to make it into a trilogy, and then I found a publisher that was like, oh yes, we understand why you'd want to do this as a standalone. You can do that. So then I had to go back and be like, okay, now squish it all down. So that was kind of a traumatic experience because I did sort of study the structure for a trilogy and the idea of okay, you have these 3 different books. You want people to have things that they're wondering about from book to book, different things that they could put together on their own or speculate, and then they get more information in the next book, all those different things. And then all of a sudden it was oh, all that out the window. And yet a lot of those things are now plot relevant. And so I had to be okay, well, how do I squish them all down into this one large story? So that was quite a quite traumatic. But at the same time, I also wanted it to be like a story that felt like it was in a much bigger world. Like you are seeing just this like one sliver of this larger universe. And so like not every single thing is answered or like these characters know about. There are things that like unfolded in the past where you can speculate, like readers could speculate, or I know what happened, but it's not like specifically disclosed because like not every single thing is supposed to be tied up as if like the book is like an end all be all. Every single character has like a bow at the end. Because I just wanted to feel more like it was like just a slice of like one particular history.
I love it. Serena?
My background in writing before I started doing novels was comic books, and I did ongoing series where they were very episodic. So I was used to writing like in that formula, like writing like a series. I wrote a standalone book, I don't know, it's like a couple of years ago now, I'm not sure. And I actually found it really hard to write a standalone story because I want to be able to tell like a much larger story than what I can within one novel. I prefer having like multiple novels, and one of the things that I'm able to do, which I'm really thankful for, is I have this like, I don't do like any notes, I don't have anything like on my computer. I literally just remember like what all the characters have done, like what are their aspects, like kind of like your Excel sheet. It's like a spider web thing in my brain. I'm on the autism spectrum, so I'm able to do that, which is really friggin' rad. But and so I plan all of the books like way ahead of time. So we have like the next 3 characters already planned. I already pre-thought of it before Disney even approved it, because they always approve the characters that I want to do, which is amazing. And so I have this like long game that I've been playing from like the first book. So I really love to be able to take my time and tell the story through multiple characters throughout the entire series. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not going to write like a standalone. I would just rather there be at least like three books. So, because like after my last standalone book, people are like, it feels like there should be a next one, and I was really hoping there would be. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, if I lost my Excel sheet, I would just kill everybody.
Let's not have that happen. Okay, let's open it up to the audience. Any questions? People are leaving. Okay.
So I was just sitting here thinking, my favorite part of media is whenever they do callbacks and how media kind of intertwines with each other. Like you're watching a TV show and they'll mention like another TV show. Or like with Carl, for example, it's like Donut's constantly bringing up things like Wonderwall. How do you, what would you say?
Sorry, I'm very distracted.
What would you say would be like the perfect, or not perfect, but just like a good ratio for like aspiring writers on like how much media you can put into your own without it feeling like Family Guy?
Right. I love your shirt. That is a really difficult question to answer because how much references do you put in there, and are they going to age very well? And the answer is they're not going to age well, no matter how well you do them. So I try to make all the conversations as realistic as possible. I put them in a very dire situation, and I want them to act like a normal person would act. So if it naturally, we'll talk about Star Wars in that situation, we'll bring it up. I mean, Donut's a cat, and she's obsessed with Gossip Girl and Gilmore Girls. So she's going to talk about it from time to time. She's obsessed with Oasis. She's going to talk about it every once in a while. But when you put it too much, then you kind of get this weird, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It's like when you watch a sequel to a movie that had come out years and years and years ago, and it becomes too self-referential, and it becomes, a parody of itself. And for me, at least, I don't know if you guys have other opinions, the answer is you'll know it when you see it. It's really, really hard. It's threading the needle.
Vibes.
Yeah.
Like if you're feeling cringe about it, then the readers probably will too.
Yeah.
Like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
if you can see like a Family Guy writer looking up and being like, "This is perfect," then
Exactly.
Hello. Then my question is for Matt. It's along the lines of building your world up from the sewers. For the bathrooms. For the bathrooms. How private are the bathrooms? We know that the producers can't see them due to the cookbook and the message system being run through the system. However, the AI is going crazy at this point, and I'm just curious how that all works.
Nothing is hidden from the AI. The AI is
God.
aware of everything. So in this world, in the Carl world, the people watching the show, they can't see the characters when they're in the restrooms. And as a result of that, they utilize that to their great advantage. But the AI that's running everything, who's the character of itself and has gone crazy, that is a spoiler,
Sorry.
is aware of everything.
Oh, good. Great. Thank you.
Hi. When you're writing an ongoing series, the start of each new book is like an opportunity to reintroduce the readers to your world. How do you each approach doing that and how do you decide, okay, what's important, what's not important, in kind of recapping and reintroducing the world that you built? And is it sometimes an opportunity to tweak things from earlier editions? And I guess your opinions on each of those. And Matt, I think you might say that you cheat on this one also.
Yeah, well, I have an ongoing story, but I'll let everyone else answer. Mine's like one long arc, so.
I cheated a little bit in that each of the books in this series is following a different couple, so each one is set in a different area of the country. So it kind of gives me a chance to bring in a new aspect of this world. But I know as a reader, what I want most in this world is a summary of the previous books at the beginning of each new fantasy. So I'm kind of like trying to do that without actually doing that, because I know I read a book and I forget every single thing that ever happened. So I need that.
Is it me? Okay. So I'm the kind of person that remembers everything that I read or watch or whatever. So at first, I would just start off where I left off, and my editors were very much like, you need to recap this. Like, no one is going to remember. And like, my editors sometimes like, I don't even remember like what happened last time. So I hate recapping personally. Like, I don't like it. I feel like it's repetitive. I feel like it's going to be boring to the readers who, but now I'm hearing you love that. And I'm finding out that a lot of other people love it. And so, but I found a way, anytime that I get feedback from an editor that it's like against something that I feel comfortable doing, I find a way to do it in a way that brings me joy. So that's one of the reasons why I started using the Odd Sisters, like, and this thing called the Book of Fairy Tales that's like within the entire series. So I can reiterate, but in a way that feels like organic and natural to the story for me. And readers really appreciate it because they don't have the kind of memory I do, and they really do need the refreshers, like after 13 books, So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Hey, everybody. Hey, Matt. My name's Chris Rohn. I'm an actor, and I'm excited to audition for your live-action adaptation. I'm hoping to get Carl. We'll see, though. God damn it, don't it? So my question, though, is if Carl somehow found himself here at Comic-Con and saw he was a celebrity, even here on Earth, and would he be disgusted by all the attention? Like, would it enrage him that people are treating him like a hero or a meme while people are still dying in the dungeon? Or would he find some time to sign some autographs, eat a Wetzel pretzel, and finally fucking detonate that floor 3 bomb just to make a point?
Oh, two things. First off, I see you're wearing shoes.
I thought about coming in just my boxers, but...
Well, in book 5 of Dungeon Crawler Crawl, he does go to a convention where he is treated
finish
like...
book 4, so careful.
Okay, so there's CrawlCon, so that question will be actually answered for you in book 5.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's it.
All right. Thanks.
We have time for one more question.
Hello. Okay. Anyway, so I have a question in general when it comes to foreshadowing. Specifically, I'm just kind of curious, when you guys are creating a world, when you're writing something, when you're trying to foreshadow a series of events or a character's history, something like that, do you try to focus on a singular event and then build it out? Or do you have like a general idea that you're going to flesh out later? Like, for example, I was just re-listening to book 1 of Dungeon Crawler Carl, where Mordecai is talking about later on in the floors, not everyone who's in the dungeon doesn't want to be in the dungeon. Some people actually do want to be in the dungeon, where he's hinting at, and also saying there are no gods,
Right.
hinting at things that are going to happen later in the books, because I'm not going to say anything past it, but it's specifically maybe null. But essentially, I was just kind of curious how you guys build out that foreshadowing. How do you feel when you're trying to figure out an event, how it's going to play out later on?
Well, I think the answer is different if you're a plotter or a pantser. For me, I just make it all up as I go along. So those are reminders to myself for something. Like, remember that bucket I was talking about earlier?
Yeah.
That's something I punned into the bucket, and it's kind of like little road marks, little landmarks I want to hit when I get into the later books. But I am curious on the answer for those of us who plot, how you foreshadow.
I do not plot, so I was going to say all my foreshadowing is accidental, and I like read the draft and I'm like, wow, I really set that up nicely. Good job.
So I grew up reading a lot of mystery novels, so Sherlock Holmes, Agatha Christie, things like that. And one of the things that I always thought was really interesting is how you read, the way that mystery novels often work is that you're reading the story and they're collecting all this information, these events are unfolding, etc. And then at the end, it's just, you just get told, like there's been all these hints that you have been accumulating and maybe you picked up on them or maybe you didn't. And at the end, the detective or whatever just like gives you this like long monologue explaining like what it all meant and what actually happened and everything. And so one of the things when I started writing, in my story is non-linear. So you begin in the present and there's these events that are happening and there's hints at things, and then you go into the past and you actually see those events unfold and how characters got to where they are. And so when I was writing it was kind of fun to do the mystery story hinting and then actually go and do the actual showing of how those things happened, instead of it just being like somebody standing there doing this really long monologue of all the things that you missed and now this is what all of them meant. Just like that to me always was like a little bit annoying of like, but I want to see this murder or whatever thing take place. And so that's kind of where my inspiration for foreshadowing has come from, is a lot of mystery novels.
I love it. Would anyone else on this panel like to answer the question?
I think I'm kind of like a weird hybrid between plotter and pantser. So though I think about everything a lot and I do a lot of foreshadowing, it's never like on purpose, or maybe it is. I let the character really drives the stories for me. So when it feels organic to like hint to something, then I will. But there's a certain measure of like having to foreshadow, but I don't think I ever go, I am foreshadowing now. Like it's not, you know what I mean? It just kind of happens. So, yeah.
Amazing. And that's it for questions.
Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you all so much for joining us.